Hi guys, welcome to today's video. So we're going to go through every single book I read in 2024. I read a total of 71 books in 2024. I did not reach my reading goal. My reading goal was 150 books. Throughout all of the year, I was nowhere near close to reaching that goal, so I'm not very surprised. In 2023, I read, I think, around like 120 books. Between 100 and 120 books, and so I thought, let's just reach higher. And I obviously read less this year, so I didn't get that goal, but that's okay, I don't mind too much. We're going to get into all of my stats from the year and everything, but firstly I will say sorry if the lighting is just not great in this video. I'm filming in a different spot because I thought this would be the easiest way to show the books I've read. I have all the books up above me on my bookshelf, and this is where I put the books once I finish them. Obviously it doesn't look like this, but I've like organized it in a way so all of the books are here and you can see them. So I do apologize if the lighting is terrible. I tried, but I'm going to talk about each book very briefly because we have a lot to go through, and I'll also be looking at my phone because I'm going to be doing it in order because I have each book tracked in order on my Goodreads. But we'll firstly go through my stats. Oh, wait, one more thing. I don't know if you can see it very well, but I got a dragonfly tattoo yesterday. It's matching with my sister, and I just wanted to show it off. Anywho, let's get into the stats. So I'm getting all of these stats from Storygraph. I mainly use Goodreads, but every time I read it, like I start a book and finish a book, I do track it on Storygraph so I can get stats like this because Goodreads doesn't really show you a lot. So like I said, I read 71 books and 23,509 pages. The genre I read the most was romance, unsurprisingly. In my reading journal, I had a tracker where I tracked each genre I read, and it was mostly romance, and even the fantasies I read all had romance in them, so I'm not surprised I read mostly romance. And then contemporary, which I'm pretty sure is like contemporary romance because I only read a few literary fictions. Fantasy and manga is the same, and then sports is sport romance, not an actual sport book. When I first saw that I was like, huh? But no, it's sport romance. I would never read like a sports book because I hate sport. But anyways, the longest book I read was 680 pages. The shortest was 70 pages. The least time I spent reading a book was 1 day. That was a graphic novel. The most time spent was 42 days when I was in a slump. And then the top 2 authors I read the most from are manga authors. So I'm reading a lot of volumes from a manga, so I read a lot by one author. So the first one, I think that's Love is War. And then the second one is Horimiya. And then the third top author is A.K. Kajino, which is the Villains and Virtues fantasy series I read this year, which I've talked so much about. My average rating is 4.04, which is pretty good. I think that's really good. I only had 4 5-star reads. One of them is a reread, so I don't count that as a 5-star. But I only had 4, which is very low compared to other years, but I tried to be stricter, but I would like to have more 5-star reads next year. Yeah, and then my graph for my ratings, it leans more to the right, which is good. This is kind of interesting. I explored the works of 28 new authors, and oh my god, I saw this last night and I was like, oh, 60 of the books I read this year were part of a series, which is a lot. That in mind, a lot of them are like romance series and stuff, but that's still a lot of series. But I feel like most books you read are a part of a series, I guess. Like, I don't read a lot of standalones. I did DNF 4 books, and that's it. We should just get into all of the books I read. We'll go through them fairly quickly. I'm going to be turning a lot to pull them out and stuff, but yeah, this is like a look at half of the books I read because I think only about 30 books are here, and then all the others were either on Kindle from the library or I unhaured them. Some of them I did have in an unhaul stack, but when I was putting this together I realized I should add them to here, but some I have already gotten rid of because I didn't like them or whatnot. So let's just start. Like I said, we're going to go in order, so I'll pull up my Goodreads. So the first book I read was Ignite by Melanie Harlow. This was a single dad romance, really cute. I gave it a 4.25 stars. I really recommend it. I've had a lot of fun. There are some serious tones in the book, but it's more just a fun read. I wouldn't take it too seriously. Then I read Lore Olympus Volume 1. I do want to continue this series, but my library doesn't have the other volumes. I am in process of getting them to order them, hopefully, but I also really enjoyed that book. And I will mention I don't rate graphic novels or manga because I never know how to rate them in comparison to actual novels. I then read Horimiya Volume 2, which I enjoyed, and then the first physical book I read was Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher. This is one of my favorite books of the year. It's the second book in the Dreamland Billionaire series. I gave it a 4.5 stars and I highly recommend it, of course. But yeah, I talked a lot about this book in my favourite books of the year video, which should be out before this one. Next I read Glint by Raven Kennedy. This is the second book in the Plated Prisoner series. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I enjoyed this book, I did. It was a nice sequel to the first book, although I was disappointed by some things. I did enjoy it. It is a dark fantasy romance. Then on Kindle I read Thrown in the Dark, which is the first book in the Villains and Virtues series I mentioned. I gave that book a 4.75. Obviously another one of my favourites. And then I read Only When It's Us, the first book in the Bergman Brothers series, which prior to this book I had read like 3 books in the series, and then I decided to read the first one. I gave it a 3.75. Did I already say that? I'm not sure. And I enjoyed it. It did take me a long time to read and I didn't like it as much as the other books. I did read Bride, which this was a highly anticipated read for me and I was quite disappointed. A lot of things that happened in this book I was really annoyed by, specifically the third act breakup, and I just didn't really feel a big connection to the characters. I gave this book a 4.25 stars. The first non 5-star I gave to an Ali Hazelwood book was this one, which she is my favourite author and I still love her books, but I was very sad about this book. I then read An Education in Malice by S.D. Gibson, which I gave a 5 stars, my first 5-star read of the year. I really love this book. It's dark academia and it's a sapphic retelling of Camilla the Classic, one of my favourite books. Highly recommend this book. Then read Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey, which was my second 5-star book of the year. A very fun sports romance. I really enjoyed it. I had a really good time reading this. I was very happy and giggly and kicking my feet while reading it. I then read Heartstopper Volume 4. Where is that? Volume 4, which I did enjoy. I am collecting the special editions. I only have, what do I have? I have 2 and 4. But yeah, I did really enjoy it. I think Heartstopper is a very sweet series. I don't really need to talk much about it because everyone knows about Heartstopper, but I did really enjoy this volume. And then I read Heartstopper Volume 5, which I didn't enjoy as much. It felt really odd. I don't know, something about it. I wasn't a fan of that book as much, but I am going to read the last book in the series when it comes out. I then read Summoned to the Wilds, which is also a part of the Villains and Virtues series, and gave it a 4.5 stars. Really enjoyed it. I then read Dance of Thieves, which I DNF'd at 24%. This is a fantasy romance. I got up to page 120, but yeah, I was not enjoying it. The romance was so quick. I think it obviously goes on a little longer after this first bit, but I was not enjoying it. I felt no connection to the characters. I was reading it so slowly. But this book was gifted to me, so I am going to keep it regardless, and it is a really pretty cover. But I was disappointed, and this was a book I really wanted to read for a while, so I was sad about this. I then read The Right Move by Liz Tomford, my first book by her. This is the second in the Windy City series. I gave this a 4.25. I really enjoyed this and highly recommend it. I would have rated it higher if it was shorter, but I overall did really enjoy it. I then read Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I think this is my first literary fiction of the year. This is Japanese translated fiction, which I really need to read more of. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very sweet, heartfelt book that kind of gets you to think a little, but I don't think it was very profound. It didn't change the way I think about my life. I just thought it was overall a sweet and nice read, and I think anyone could benefit from reading this book. And I gave it a 4 stars. I then read Horimiya Volume 3, and then I read Behind the Net, which is the first book in the Vancouver Storm series, and I gave it a 2.5 stars. Is that the lowest rating I gave a book this year? Maybe. Oh no, I think another book might have been lower. I really didn't like that book. I found it very cringy and just overall did not enjoy it. I then read Eclipse of the Crown, which is the third book in the Villains and Virtues series, which I actually do have the physical copy of, and I gave it a 4.75 stars. Really enjoyed this book. I then read King of Pride by Anna Wong, the second book in the Kings of Sin series. I was honestly disappointed by this book. I expected to really love it and I did not. I found it very overall just boring. Both of the characters were not interesting. I liked them. It's just such a boring story. Nothing really happened, to be honest. And I gave it a 3.5 stars. I then read the third book in the Plated Prisoner series. This book was the longest book I read this year. I think it was 680 pages or something. And it took me literally a month to read. And not because of how long it was, just because I had so many ups and downs while reading this book. I feel like most of these books are kind of quick reads, but with this book, there was parts I was enjoying and then parts I was not hating. I feel like that's a strong word, but just not enjoying, and parts where I'll just get fed up with the book. And then by the end of it, I was just annoyed with how it ended, and I'm not going to continue the series, I've decided. I feel like things just, I hated how they panned out. And there was this big thing that happened in this book, which you're anticipated for, you're waiting for while reading the first and second book. Like, you're very excited for this part in the book. And I felt like how it panned out was so disappointing, and I thought was a little ridiculous. So I don't think I'll continue the series, but it was a fun fantasy series to read, which I rated that book a 4.25 stars. I then read Salt Kiss. This is my first book I read by Sarah Simone. This is part of a romance series. I read this book and at first I was really enjoying it. I thought it was like a fun read, a little bit more of a darker romance. It wasn't very dark, but on the darker side. But then the way things ended was so weird, and I didn't know it was a series and that you had to read the other books in the series when reading it. I was honestly so confused. I feel like I wasn't that invested to continue the series, but I was like, I guess I have to now to see where this goes. Then I heard reviews of the second book and everyone said it was just not worth it. From what I heard, that the second book, nothing really happened. I've just heard bad things about the second book, so I'm like, there's no point in me continuing the series. But I think I will keep this book anyways because the cover is very pretty. I did rate it a 3.5, so I didn't hate it. Like, I did enjoy it and have a fun time, but I was overall at the end of the book very annoyed. I then read Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood, which was my third 5-star book of the year. This is a YA romance. I really enjoyed this book and highly recommend it. I then read Horror Maya Volume 4 and 5. And then I read The Cat Who Saved Books. This is another Japanese literary fiction translated work. I really enjoyed this, although I was a little disappointed because I expected a lot of things from this book. I thought it was going to be like an amazing read, and it didn't feel like that. It felt like a good read, but it was a really heartwarming and nice story. But I feel like this book is supposed to serve you like some life lessons that you learn from it, but a lot of the like life lessons were kind of obvious. But it was a sweet read, and I did, like I said, enjoyed it. And I just love how Japanese literary fiction is written. Well, obviously it's not the same because it's translated, but I feel like there's just this whimsical way it's written. It just has a unique style that I really enjoy. And I love cats. I don't know if that's obvious, but I love cats so much. So I do love reading a book where a cat is involved, and this cat is heavily involved in this book. He talks, and I just thought it was very sweet. I did give that book a 4.25 stars. I then read Brutal Prince by Sophie Locke. This was my first ever dark romance. I had read like darker fantasy romance series like the Play to Prisoner series, but never really just a dark romance. It's definitely not as darker as other books, but it's my first one also with the mafia kind of plot as well, and I did really enjoy it. I gave it a 4 stars. I felt like the romance was it was slow for most of it, and then towards the end I feel like it was very insta, like there was no good transition for the romance, but it was a fun read, and I might continue the series, I'm not completely sure, but I did enjoy it, and it was also my first Sophie Locke book. I then read Hooked, which is the other lowest rated book I read this year, I'm pretty sure, which I gave a 2.5 stars. Did not like this. At first it was fun, but then things just got really weird, and I hated the main character. I think at the start it's like, oh, if you're looking for like a redeemable villain or whatever, you're not going to get that, but I still expected to like him somewhat, but he had no characteristics that I liked at all, and I just found the story kind of silly. He just kind of grossed me out a bit. And I feel like this is a relationship that would never actually last. Like, I did not like it. And it's supposed to be like a Peter Pan retelling, so I thought it'd be funner, but it wasn't really, in my opinion. I then read The Predator, which I also DNF'd at 47%. This was another dark romance, and I just did not like the writing style in this book. I found it really boring. I felt like the same things were repeated over and over again, like how they made eye contact like 50 times a chapter. It was brought up so much, and it'd always be like, oh, he's boring his eyes into me, or his eyes are so intense, over and over again. And the guy in the book would hardly ever say anything, and I'm like, give me something. Give me something. And then like Spice happened out of nowhere, and I'm like, what am I reading? I don't know. I was over it. I was not enjoying it. So I DNF'd that book. I then read Horror Maya Volume 6. And then I read Flawless by Elsie Silver. My first cowboy romance. I did enjoy this book. I gave it a 4 stars. There were some things I was annoyed with. I won't go into because I've talked about them a lot in other videos, but I did enjoy this book, and I do plan to continue the series this year. I then read Done and Dusted, which I also enjoyed. I gave this book a 3.25 stars. It is on the lower side with my ratings. I felt like it was kind of boring, but I did read it really quickly. Probably one of the quickest times I've read a romance book, but it wasn't that really interesting. I feel like, in my opinion, it was kind of overhyped, but I do plan to continue the series. I then read Horimiya Volume 7, which is the last volume I read from this series. I'm pretty sure I fell out of love with this series. I felt like things were getting boring and dragged on and a little weird. I've found that with a few manga series where things just get a little icky and weird and really like over sexual when they're supposed to be like YA. So yeah, I stopped reading that series. And then I read Kingdom of the Wicked, the first book in the series. I give this a 4.75 stars, one of my favorites from the year. I really enjoyed this book. I annotated it. I had a really good time reading this book. I highly recommend this series. I then read Bountiful, which is also a part of the Villains and Virtue series, which I gave a 5 stars and is my favorite book of the year. I love that book so much and always recommend that series. Then read Such Sharp Teeth. This is another literary fiction. It's a bit of like an unhinged, weird sort of book, but it was also very like heartfelt and emotional, and I underlined a lot, which I wasn't expecting to annotate this book at all, but I felt like there was a lot I could relate to. I thought the writing was really good. I rated this book a 4.5 stars, another one of my favorites from the year. I'm like stacking these books here and they're really close to falling, which I shouldn't probably have my coffee that close to them, but anywho. I then read King of Greed by Anna Wong, which is the third book in the Kings of Sin series and is my highest rated in the series so far. I give this a 4.25 stars. I enjoyed this a lot more than I was expecting to. I kind of didn't hear great things about this book, but I really liked it. It's like a marriage in turmoil. I think do they get a divorce, or they almost get a divorce and then they get back together, which I was very nervous for, but I ended up really enjoying it. It's like a second chance, which I'm also not a big fan of, but I think I kind of need to change my mind on that because I have liked a lot of second chance romances so far this year. Well, a lot means 2, but 2 out of 2 I liked, so that has to mean something. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I then read Serpent and the Wings of Night. Did not enjoy this book. I somewhat enjoyed it, and then the ending ruined the whole thing for me. I hated the ending. It really put me off. It made me not want to continue the series at all, so I'm not going to, but yeah, I did not enjoy it. I liked it enough to keep the book, but I'm not continuing it because what the main character said at the end made me so mad, and I cannot redeem him in my head at all, and like I didn't even like him that much, so. And it was kind of very repetitive in terms of other fantasy romances. I feel like so many I've read at the moment have been the same as others I've read, and I'm like, you need to stop doing the same thing. I then read Radio Silence, which is the first standalone book I've read by Alice Oseman. I wanted to give it a go. It is YA, which I don't typically read as much. I did enjoy it. I didn't like it as much as I thought I would, but I did like it, and I do think I'll read other books, other standalone books by her. I think there are others I might enjoy more, but yeah, I gave this book a 3.5 stars. I then read Not in Love, another Ali Hazelwood book that disappointed me. I did not enjoy this book. Oh, I enjoyed it, but I thought I'd like it so much more. I was so excited for this book. I just didn't love it. I didn't feel connection to the characters. I felt like it was too much spice in my opinion, and too much like physical attraction compared to emotional. In my review, I say 3.5 or 3.75. I still don't know which one I'd stick with. Maybe a 3.75. I think we'll stick with that one, because I still enjoyed it and I still had a good time, and I did annotate a lot. I did like the emotional side when they would talk about like the trauma and things they've gone through. I did like that, but I didn't like the relationship as much. I then read Unhinged, which was just like a silly, goofy read. It was a 70-page book. I'm not going to explain what it's about because it's really weird, but I gave it a 1 star. I didn't expect it to be a good book whatsoever. I kind of went into it thinking it'd be silly and just a quick read, and everyone else was reading it, so. I then read Love is War Volume 1 and 2, which was the start of that series. Obviously, in me reading that series, I read a lot more of those volumes this year. Then read Caught Up by Liz Tomford, which is the third book in the Windy City series. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. One of my favorites from the year. It's another single dad nanny trope. Really enjoyed this book. Girl. Ah! I then read Kingdom of the Cursed, which is the second book in the Kingdom of the Wicked series. I give this a 4.5 stars. I did really enjoy it, not as much as the first book, but I did have a really good time reading this book. I annotated it as well. I feel like it was a good middle book because the third book is the last and final book, and I feel like this was a good middle ground book. Sometimes the middle books aren't that good, but I did enjoy this book. There were a lot of ups and downs and things here and there, but I did, like I said so many times, I did really enjoy it, and I recommend this series so much. I then read Consider Me, which is the first book in a little romance series by Becca Mack, and I DNF'd this book. I got to 21% of this book. It is a hefty romance book, and I was not enjoying it whatsoever. I was buddy reading this book with my friend, and she finished it, but she felt the same as me. And she finished it before me. Like, she finished it while I was at 20%. I was like, I'm not really enjoying this. Should I DNF it? And she's like, yeah, I did not like it. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna DNF it. I found it so boring. I didn't like the male main character. He was annoying. I just wasn't enjoying it. I then read Mountains Made of Glass, which is a little fantasy romance. I think it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It was a very fun read. I gave it a 3.5 stars. I think I expected a little more from this book, but I still ended up enjoying it. It wasn't like amazingly written. It was also, like I said, short, so you can't really get a really amazing romance in a really short book, but I did enjoy it and I do recommend it. The descriptions of like the magic and the castle and the place they were living was fun. It was a little bit of a weird read, but I still enjoyed it. I then read Bound and Tied, which is also a part of the Villains of Virtue series, which I gave a 4.5 stars. Really enjoyed it. I then read Love is War Volume 3, and then I read The All Pair Affair, which is after Fangirl Down. Did not like this book whatsoever. I gave it a 3 stars. This was really, really bad. Really bad. I don't know what else I have to say. I don't recommend it at all. But I am going to read the third book. But yeah, I really didn't like this book. I then read the third book in the Dreamland Billionaire series, Final Offer, and I gave this a 4.75 stars. I loved this book. It is the second chance book I was talking about. Did that make any sense? But yeah, it was a second chance romance, and I loved it. It was also a single mum trope. The child in this book was so cute. The relationship was so good. It was really emotional as well. Overall, loved this book. Really, really enjoyed it. I then read Love is War Volume 4, 5, 6, and then I finished my first ever audiobook, which was The Door-to-Door Bookstore, which I started this audiobook over a year ago, and I stopped listening to it at one point and decided to pick it up again this year, and then I actually finished it. I have tried to listen to other audiobooks since, and I haven't really gotten into them, but I gave this a 3.5 stars. It wasn't amazing, but I did enjoy it, and it was obviously the first audiobook I could listen to, so I feel like that gives it some points. I then read The 7 Years Sleep, which I DNF'd at 32%. I just wasn't into it. I wasn't feeling a connection to the characters. I wasn't hooked or anything, and I just feel like it'd be best to DNF it because it was also taking me a really long time to read. When we got to something like exciting in the book, I didn't care at all, which just showed me that I wasn't invested in it. So yeah, I did DNF it, which I was disappointed about because people say such amazing things about this book. But I then read Love is War Volume 7, and then I read 4 books from the Campus Games series. I read every book, so I read Never Have I Ever, Spin the Bottle, Would You Rather, and Truth or Dare. These are fun, easy romance books I read while I was in a slump. Some of them I did skim through and not read properly. Others I read all of it. But I did really enjoy these books. I think they'd be good for a slump. They're not amazing books, but they were good and enjoyable. They're set at, why does it leave me? At college. They're set at college, and they're all very different and interesting, so I did enjoy those. Then I read Love is War Volume 8 and 9. Then I read The Fake Out, which is the book that follows Behind the Net, which I was not planning to read this book whatsoever. I kind of swore off the series after not enjoying Behind the Net, but then I ended up really enjoying The Fake Out, but I did skim read it like the other books I was talking about, the Campus Games books, because I was in the slump. So I didn't rate any of those books because I didn't know what to rate them. But yeah, I did enjoy it. And then I read Love is War Volume 10, and then I reread Always Only You, one of my favorite books. I gave this book a 5 stars, obviously, because I love it. I gave it a 5 star the first time I read it, so I gave it another one. This is the book that took me 40 days to read because I was in a slump. And then I read The Wingman, which is the third book in the Vancouver Storm series. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4.25 stars. I then read Travis, which follows Archer's Voice. And I also really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4.25 stars. It was a bit of a quicker read. It wasn't amazing, but I did really enjoy it. I almost teared up a few times while reading it. I then started the series Freren. I have no clue how to pronounce it. It is a like fantasy manga series. I read the first volume and really enjoyed it, which I haven't really felt like I've enjoyed a manga that much before. Maybe here and there, but never where I've been like, I'm so excited to read the next one. But I read it so quickly, really enjoyed it. I really want to continue the series. I then also read the first volume of the Apothecary Diaries, which I also did enjoy. Not as much as pham, but I did enjoy it and I'm excited to continue it, which I'm happy for. I feel like I haven't really found a manga series that I really like. I do enjoy Love is a War, but not as much, I guess. There are points when I'm reading those volumes and I'm like kind of bored. And then the last book I read is If You'll Have Me, which is a little graphic novel. It's a romance graphic novel. It's kind of like a coming of age. It's very similar to Heartstopper, but a woman and woman relationship, sapphic relationship, and I thought it was really sweet. I didn't rate it, like I said, but I thought it was really sweet and I really do highly recommend it. I thought it was so cute. I feel like you don't have much to say, but also it was just really cute and the art style was also gorgeous. Very sweet. But yeah, those are all the books I read in 2024. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say. If you have any similar thoughts, let me know. But I'm very excited for 2025. I have so many videos planned to come out in January alone. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I have a book Instagram and a book TikTok you can follow if you like. I post on there all the time. I also have my Goodreads link down below. You can add me and I'll add you back. I always update what I'm reading and stuff. Yeah, but thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you in another video hopefully soon. Bye!